Hey guys, it's Alexander Williamson here with the secret history living inside of your aquarium. Today we're going to be talking about cherry shrimp, and we're going to be talking about the history of cherry shrimp, and we're going to be talking about everything from cherry red shrimp in the wild, which doesn't exist exactly. We have a rusty brick colored version, and then we're going to be talking all the way about red rili shrimp. We're not going to be touching on too many of the color morphs, but we're going to follow that line from the wild type all the way down to blue velvet, blue dream, and blue pearl, and discuss a little bit about the difference, because in order to understand the difference and the meaning behind blue dream, blue velvet, or blue pearl shrimp, which there is a significant difference, you must first understand the history behind these shrimp and why it is important not to mix them if you want to have a true line. So, first of all, I want you to take a look at these shrimp, and you can see how red we've gotten them to be. So, this is a painted fire shrimp in that it has a streak down its back. That one may be sakura fire. But this red one on the right, who's kicking all the babies off the rock, would be considered the highest grade of today's red shrimp. It has red antennas, it has red legs, and it is so dark that you cannot tell if it's pregnant or not. You cannot see through it. Now, if you look at the shrimp around it, however, they are much closer to native neocaridina shrimp, and they all originate from the neocaridina davidii branch. Hold on, let me stabilize this while the tripod's getting stable. So, in the wild, you had shrimp that looked something like this. They were a brick red, kind of muddy color, and that's as close as a cherry shrimp that you were going to get in the wild. And in the 90s, people started keeping these in aquariums as algae cleaners, as just cleaners of detritus and things like that. Also more common was the Amano shrimp or the algae shrimp. It had a name also known as that, or the Japanese filter shrimp. Later on, though, by the late 90s, there became more and more options in the market as science and people just talking and hobbyists began to get a hold of new and varied shrimp. So the shrimp that also hit the market were from the caridina species. And cherry shrimp or neocaridina, davidii is the name of their variation. So caridina shrimp include tiger shrimp, Taiwan bee, bolt shrimp, and things like that. Variants of that, there's all sorts of different ones now, King Kong and so forth. And those ones were being kept and experimented with at the same time in Taiwan, Japan, and Singapore in the mid to late 90s. It wasn't until 2002 that they first hit the U.S. as a commodity that had a distributor. So these cherry shrimp, and they were not red like this. They were more of they looked something more like this one up here, or this one back here. They were more of a clear shrimp with some red stripes. And it wasn't until later on that selective breeding allowed them to become what they are today. So it's a relatively new development in the species that they exist. So within neocaridina davidii, you had a dark color wild shrimp, similar to, say, this fellow here. And then you had a brick or rusty colored shrimp. And then you had a black colored shrimp. And all of these variants were kind of like saying everything's a domesticated dog or Felis domesticus cat, but one's a Persian and one is a tabby cat. So they're just different color and style variations within the same species, and they weren't even that extreme in phenotype. Phenotype is what you call the expression of genes that are physically apparent. So when you can see the difference, that's the phenotype, and the genotype is what is in there. And so you may have these dark red shrimp, but they produce these lighter red babies, and that is the case. And then these babies will darken up. They're very young, but as they get older, you'll find some of them are not of the same caliber as these adult shrimp in the tank. And what we do then is called culling, and so we pull those shrimp out. Now there's two kinds of culling essentially, and I wanted to give big props to someone who's a big name in the shrimp world, and that is Lucas Bretz at LRB Aquatics. He had a very elaborate system of culling. He did not only pull the shrimp that were not red enough, as some people would do, but he took the shrimp that had other traits. So for instance, he noticed that some of the shrimp were clear in the center, and some of those clear centered shrimp actually had blue spots or light blue in the center. And so he put those in one tank, and then he selected the ones that were most similar to those traits that he was looking for, and through a series of a dozen or more tanks, he would then separate these genes, and after generation and generation of doing this, and then pulling them out, setting them aside, pulling them out, setting them aside, and using a ton of tanks, he was able to get shrimp that are very, very predictable. And his shrimp are the blue strain that I still have today. I love them. They throw out only like 1 to 5% that are even not up to caliber, which is a crazy rate for how consistent a gene line is. So back to the history lesson. Amano shrimp and tiger shrimp were also big in the market, and it was just too hard to take care of those shrimp for your average aquarium owner, because you needed the RODI or distilled water and different minerals and different diets. And now they're becoming more popular again the last 10 years, and 5 especially. But at the time, Amano shrimp and these shrimp won out as the easiest care. And by 2003, Petco and PetSmart started carrying cherry or red cherry shrimp. And they kind of look something like this baby. They were translucent with the stripes. And the next variant that breeders began to see in the U.S. was these type, which are red rili shrimp, and they have a clear spot in their back. Now that clear spot, this all originates from one of those 3 caridina, neocaridina davidii species, and it is from the brick red rusty one that produced these. So from here, that turned blue, and then after generations, a dozen generations or more of that, we were able, or not me, I didn't do all the work, but people like Lucas and Miss Jinx or Rachel O'Leary were able to get little blue shrimp such as this, and more over time, selecting for density of color and consistency of color, as well as for other traits like size or patterns. You also ended up with orange shrimp or tangerine shrimp. You ended up with green jade shrimp. The list goes on and on. But what I wanted to explain to you is, meanwhile, in the US, we're playing with these shrimp, and over in Asia, China is beginning to breed them en masse, as well as Thailand and Indonesia, and they have perfected simply the dark red shrimp. Now, I'm not saying that that's all they were doing. There were plenty of hobbyists in Japan and Taiwan who were doing competitions and breeding many different shrimp. and doing it in small containers, oftentimes because the tradition of keeping koi was too hard as cities became more and more densely packed and urbanization takes hold. So let's transition now, and we're coming over here, and I apologize for the wobbles, but we're coming over here and we're looking at the grades of shrimp. So from here, you can see that those shrimp that I was talking about, the original 3 wild types, neocaridina davidii, neocaridina davidii, neocaridina davidii. Here's the rusty one, which then split into this family. Here is the darker brown one, which led into choco or chocolate, which also allowed Bloody Marys and even darker grade Bloody Marys to be created. And then in the process, when you mix these, you end up with a blue diamond, and that's a quirk of genetics. So when you mix certain shrimp, such as a deep blue neon, or a chocolate, you can end up with a crazy blue grade, or there's just different combinations that happen that are unexpected. It's not like mixing paints. It's not red and blue is going to get you purple, or even as simple as red and blue will get you a half red, half blue shrimp. So on the other part of the spectrum, in this same family, the other main player is the neocaridina palmata. And that is where we get our white pearls, our snowballs, our blue pearls. And these are pretty close naturally to what they look like in that they're a softer color. And so they also end up producing some of the more jelly type blues, as well as the path of noticing people like Lucas and the breeders out in Asia. Notice that you have red rili shrimp right here, and that clear spot is turning blue, or they're getting blue dots. And that's actually common in lobsters and other shellfish and crustaceans, so it's not completely unheard of. And geneticists and people with a slight background in that were able to pick up on that and follow through with it. So then you end up with a blue rili, or a mix, and this isn't as straightforward as this chart, which I've shown in other videos, but then they bred that down into a blue jelly. So that's a translucent that they've gotten the blue to spread and the red to dissipate. In that same vein, they also were able to get blue velvets to develop. So that is one course. And then another course is the chocolate shrimp also gave way to the blue velvet. And this is of some debate. Some people have different ways of saying that this happened. It seems to have happened in the early 2000s, the first cases of it. There were isolated cases of certain shrimp morphing and skipping some of these steps, so to speak, and turning straight from a cherry red into a mostly blue or clearish blue. But to start getting them to predictably breed a certain way, they followed this chart for the most part. Now, there's a few updates we need to make to this chart, and Lucas is actually the one who pointed that out to me. But over here, I wanted you to see how far we've come. So this is 1997, 1999, all the way up to 2001 or 2. And this is what you would buy, all excited. I remember that there is a red shrimp that's not a ghost shrimp. It's clearish, it's red, and it's got little tiger stripes. Then they were able to start breeding more and more red into it, and more until even the legs and everything are red. So that's just kind of your working down the scale. You've got a low-grade cherry shrimp. You've got the sakura low-grade. Sometimes they say there's another grade of sakura, or sakura fire. and then you've got a high grade fire, and then you've got painted fire or S grade or S or double S grade, or grade A sakura. It kind of depends on the system you're working with. But what I wanted to explain is why you should not mix your blue shrimp that you get from different sources, and why people like Miss Jinx or Rachel O'Leary have been so adamant and outspoken about why it matters what we call our shrimp. People like her and Lucas and hundreds or thousands of other hobbyists have taken, it took Lucas dozens of tanks to be selectively breeding and not just throwing out the ones that weren't red enough, but taking the ones that were blue just in case and putting them aside. And then taking that ones with the blue spot and breeding them with other blue spots, and then having two kinds from there and putting those in other tanks. And then so on and so forth until he arrives at, a carbon blue rili or rili shrimp, however you want to say that word. It means a clear shrimp with other spots, so of color. So the grayer or blackish type ends up making black rose or deep blue when bred selectively, then into the carbon rilis, and then the carbon rilis begin to have more clear spots. And as I posted in my other video, it turns out they also have a carbon rili with a black body and a gold stripe. So that's probably what happened, is one of my blue carbon rilis or one of my blue velvets reverted back, in theory, to one of these stages, and then had the gene that caused this golden back. So you can check that out in other videos. Also go back and check out my history where I talk about all of these shrimp. But basically what I wanted to show you was all the paths for these blues and why it matters what we're saying. So even within neocaridina, not even going into caridina, you've got blue velvet, which were bred over time, and then you've got blue dream, and then from there there's also blue topaz, there's blue carbon rili, so some of them are blue shouldered and they're still a light blue, then there's blue jelly, there's opal blue or pearl blue, and a lot of people have tried to change these names as a selling point, but really it's important to know the lineage, because when you're breeding shrimp, you could have two blue velvets and they have all the genes of their ancestors leading back to the wild, and they could end up as far back as here. But the more you've bred them, so like Lucas's breeds super true, and you get blue shrimp almost all the time. And if they do throw an older variant, it's usually just a light blue or something like that. So his, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lucas, are from a red rili with blue, and then that blue was selected from over and over again, or from a rili shrimp in any case, and selected from. So I just wanted to explain that to you guys, and that the fact that these shrimp are still relatively new. Now there are 1,500 species of freshwater shrimp that we have described and discovered, and many of them already have brighter colors than these shrimp, and so we are just scratching the surface, the very tip of the iceberg of the potential shrimp that we could have in this hobby. So I encourage you guys to check out other shrimp, to look into the caridina shrimp, but to look into things like bamboo shrimp or filter feeding fan shrimp, or the Silawasi versions of the caridina shrimp, such as the green and yellow ones, the black Malawa shrimp. There's all sorts of shrimp out there, and I encourage you guys to look at them. I hope this taught you a little something and entertained you for a while if you're breeding shrimp or just curious. And if you want to learn more, I have a whole playlist set up for that. And if you stuck with me this long, please click thumbs up, I'd appreciate it, and subscribe so you can check out more information coming up on this whole colony, a nursery of shrimp, and the system I use to breed up to 8 different types in various tanks at different times, playing musical shrimp, shuffling them around. So thank you so much, you guys. It's great to talk to you. It's getting late for me, but I just wanted to say thanks for sticking in. Take care of your fish, take care of your shrimp and all your critters, take care of business and each other, and just keep swimming, guys. And have a good night. I'll talk to you later. This is Alex Williamson with The Secret History Living Inside Your Aquarium. Take care, guys.